We hear this all the time. Motivation gets you started. Discipline keeps you going. Today, we're going to really dig into that. We're going to break down why waiting for that spark of motivation can actually lead to total burnout, and how building real discipline, well, that's what keeps the engine running for the long haul.
So, let me ask you something. Do you ever find yourself just waiting? Waiting for that perfect mood to hit, or for some lightning bolt of inspiration before you start that big project, or even just go to the gym? If that sounds familiar, you're going to want to stick around, because what we're about to cover might just flip how you think about getting things done.
All right, first up, let's talk about what I'm calling the tyranny of can. This is where we explore how our modern obsession with achievement, this constant hunt for motivation, has kind of created a culture of complete and utter burnout.
The philosopher Byung-Chul Han just nails it with this quote, and it's a little unsettling. He's saying that in our endless quest to improve ourselves, we turn our own lives into a project. But here's the crazy twist. That project, our own self-improvement, becomes a weapon, a projectile that we end up aiming right back at ourselves. Now, to really get this, Han draws this super important distinction. We used to live in what he calls a disciplinary society. Think old-school bosses and teachers telling us what we should and should not do. The rules came from the outside. But now, we're in an achievement society. And this society doesn't shout no. It whispers, yes, you can. The pressure isn't coming from some external boss anymore. It's a relentless internal drive to always be better. And here's the paradox, right? We feel so free. We're the ones in charge, pushing ourselves to do more, be more, optimize everything. But what Han argues is that this is actually a way more effective and kind of sneaky form of control. We've willingly become both the harsh master, demanding impossible results, and the exhausted slave trying to deliver. Which leads us to what burnout really is today. It's not just about being tired from working too much, no. It's this deeper, soul-crushing fatigue. It comes from the constant pressure to invent and reinvent yourself, to perform in a world where you can be anything has started to feel a lot more like you must be everything. Okay, so if chasing motivation is the problem, what's the answer? Well, Section 2 has a pretty counterintuitive cure. Action creates motivation. Yep, you heard that right. We've had it completely backwards this whole time. This quote gets at a huge idea from therapy called behavioral activation. And the science on this is really solid. Action has to come first. You don't wait to feel good before you do something, and that's what makes you feel good. It completely flips the entire script on its head.
Let's look at how this plays out. This diagram here shows a really dangerous cycle. It all starts with something stressful. Maybe you lose your job. That leads to a lot of negative feelings, obviously. And what's our first instinct? To withdraw. We avoid people, we stay in bed. But that's just the beginning of the spiral.
Because look at what happens next. When you withdraw, it just causes more negative things to happen. Your friends might stop calling because you never answer. You might miss a bill payment. And all of that just reinforces those awful feelings, creating a second, even more powerful vicious cycle that just drags you deeper and deeper down. So the big question is, how do we break out of this? It's basically a three-step process. First, you just have to notice the avoidance. Become aware of what you're doing, how you're pulling away. Second, you take small steps. We're not talking about giant leaps here. And finally, and this is the real game changer, you act opposite to the emotion. You do the very thing your anxiety or sadness is screaming at you not to do. But, just doing things for the sake of doing things, that's not going to last. For your actions to be sustainable, for them to actually build into real discipline, they need a direction. They need a why.
And this is where your values come into play. I want you to think of your values like a compass, not a map. A map tells you the destination. A compass just points you in the right direction. Values aren't about achieving a specific goal. They're about the kind of person you want to be along the way, no matter where you end up.
So what are your values? What does your compass point to? Here are some of the big areas people think about. Is being a good family member a core value? What about personal growth, or your health, or your community? Taking a minute to figure out what truly matters to you. That's the essential first step to building discipline that actually sticks.
And this is where it all becomes real. You have to translate those big abstract values into small, concrete, schedulable actions. So if your value is being a supportive friend, that's not something you can just do. But you can schedule, call Sarah on Tuesday afternoon. See? This is how your values become the actual fuel for your discipline.
Okay, so we've got our why. That's our values. Now we need to talk about the how. When we take these actions, how do we make sure our effort actually makes a difference? And that brings us to the whole idea of purposeful practice.
Now, we've all heard practice makes perfect a million times, but check out this data. A huge study in 2014 looked at how much practice actually explained top performance in different fields, and the results were shocking. For education, practice only explained about 4% of the difference. So what gives? Is practice a total myth?
Well, not quite. The big issue was how they defined practice. The researchers who later took a closer look at this study pointed out that the original analysis just lumped all kinds of activities together, a lot of which don't actually make you better at anything.
And that leads us to the crucial difference between just doing something over and over and engaging in what's called deliberate practice. This isn't just mindless repetition. As you can see, it's highly structured. It's focused work specifically designed to push you just beyond your current limits. This is the kind of disciplined effort that leads to real, measurable improvement.
All right, for our final section, we're going to bring all this together with a really unexpected twist. We've talked a ton about the discipline of action. But what about an equally important skill, the discipline of stillness?
Hey, remember that burnout society we talked about at the beginning? It runs on hyperactivity. But here's what's so wild. Byung-Chul Han completely reframes this for us. He says all our constant busyness, that's actually a passive state. We're just reacting to pings and notifications and impulses. True contemplation, actually doing nothing, is the active state. It takes real disciplined effort to resist all of those distractions.
And what happens when we can actually master that discipline of doing nothing? The author Neil Gaiman puts it so perfectly here. Boredom isn't some empty void we have to fill with our phones. It's the quiet space where our minds finally have a chance to breathe, to wander, and to create. And the science totally back this up. When we intentionally let our minds just drift, we're not being lazy. We're firing up this incredibly powerful cognitive tool. It can spark creativity, lead to those aha solutions for tough problems, give us a totally fresh perspective, and it can even just make us feel better.
And so we're going to end on this question. In this achievement society that's constantly screaming at us to do more, pushing us all toward burnout, maybe the ultimate form of discipline isn't about hustling harder. Maybe it's about developing the strength and the focus to intentionally do less, to be still, and to just let our minds be. What could that unlock for you?